So this is like an ongoing failure in leftist analysis, unfortunately. And leftists are at their worst when it comes to geopolitics, which is really frustrating because it should be where we shine. There are American exceptionalists who think that like we are the shining light of the world. And there are, I think, American diabolists who kind of have the opposite view, where everything bad that happens has to come from the United States. During the Cold War, of course, we were responsible for orchestrating like atrocities all around the world. We still are, to a large extent. But what a lot of lefties don't seem to understand is that the bad things that the American government does, they aren't done randomly, and they aren't done, like, I guess, maliciously, in the sense that they do so because they enjoy causing suffering. They do so because there are like sets of material conditions that incentivize powerful nations to do bad things. And this affects all countries. America's the strongest, sure, but it's a pretty ubiquitous set of rules. I mean, this is like basic Marxist analysis. And when you have situations like what's happening in Ukraine, because America is the big dog on the planet, I think a lot of lefties are really hesitant to express any narrative which sounds like a de facto endorsement of American geopolitical hegemon. And that's what they interpret this situation as. They can't see Ukraine or Russia as individual belligerents because everything has to fall under the specter of US imperialism. And to an extent, that's not necessarily wrong. We do cast a very long shadow, but it doesn't remove the possibility of other actors being like very unambiguously in the wrong and acting for their own purposes. And that's what Russia's done here. They're acting on pretty like unambiguous fascist, expansionist tendencies, very like ethnic supremacist stuff. And we've seen this happen before. It's not new. We see this happen both with and without American direction. And a lot of these lefties are just hesitant to come across as though they're like tepidly agreeing with the US State Department. And I think it's cowardly of them. They've been wrong on basically everything pertaining to this war, and they continue to be. And I think it's just an ongoing unwillingness to fall, even nominally, in the line of like agreeing with American foreign interests.
So here's the thing about what my probably most controversial opinion is on the left, right? And that is that anti-imperialism, as it's understood today on the left, is not the definition of I am someone who is against forms of imperialism, right? It is a conspiracy theory that kind of divides the world into empire and things that are resisting empire, trying to understand the world in this black and white empire versus anti-empire versus empire mentality is what holds the left back away from so much of the structural analysis needed to understand many of the conflicts happening across the world.
Yeah, well, the thing that really frustrates me is that, like, to get back to Marx, as leftists like to do, he addressed this in a sort of anti-essentialist reading of the nature of the relationship between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? Because it's a really common mistake that people make, like, I don't know, baby leftists, where they think like, okay, well, rich people are evil and poor people are good. That was a commonly held belief by some people, even like 250 years ago. And Marx wrote, there are conditions that incentivize bad behavior from the people in power, those who control the means of production. And there are systems that incentivize cooperative behavior from the working class. But these aren't like essentialist dictates. These are forces, sure, but much in the same way that there can be fish who swim upstream. There are more complexities than just, are you part of this class? Are you good or evil? This was like the debate that was had between Slavoj Žižek and Jordan Peterson, where Jordan Peterson misrepresented the socialist perspective as one where like the bourgeoisie are innately evil, whereas it's more like the material forces that dictate and control their behavior or influence their behavior are like negative ones. And likewise with empire. I think that like the principled approach is, from an anti-imperialist perspective, what conditions are we looking to fight, right? Like global hegemon, economic domination, neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, right? The behavior of the World Bank and the IMF, right? Empire. These are things that should be challenged, but technically any country can engage in them, right? Small countries engage in bad behaviors with each other all the time, right? Like the Serbians and the Kosovars, right? Like the
Well, I'm
attempting
Lebanese and Lebanon and Syria.
y-
Lebanon's been a
all
tool of Syria for decades,
all
right?
the
So
time. Sudan, South Sudan, like there are tons of instances where like smaller countries that aren't global hegemons demonstrate obvious tendencies of empire, imperialism, and fascism. So you should be against
mhm.
the tendencies, not just against the biggest theoretical perpetrators of them.
But that's what's insane about this Russia stuff is it's so black and white. It's
Mm.
an invasion, it's colonialism, they're kidnapping children. We're talking about massive crimes against humanity. There's no equivocation to be had here. Yet the left still finds itself hamstrung by this idea of what should we be doing? Oh, we should be encouraging peace between this country that wants to exist and this country that wants to genocide them. And I don't understand what level of, and this, that there's that meme always about liberals with the Ku Klux Klan on one side and Antifa on the other, and the liberals in the middle saying, how about we just kill half of the, and this is, so many socialists are finding themselves in this position.
Yeah, it's the
now.
leftists. Yeah, it's the leftists for this one, for sure. Now, the liberals definitely have the better angle in the foreign policy here. They've been right on basically every level, and the leftists that I've seen online have been wrong on basically every level. It's insane, like L after L after L. And I got a lot of hate, by the way, because I was one of the few people on the online left who pushed back against that. And I wasn't trying to be contrarian or anything, I'm not of the impression that like literally every bad foreign policy or geopolitical action has to be undertaken by the United States and its allies. It's possible for there to be like a multipolar, like nuanced approach towards understanding who's in the right and who's in the wrong. But they don't want to sound like liberals. Like at the end of the day, that's it, right? Like they don't want to mistakenly be, they don't want to be accused of sounding like liberals. It's like a big identity thing for a lot of them.
But we have these kind of national populist characters coming to prominence all around the world who are just like, yeah, I'm violent, I'm a fascist, and democracy is in retreat right now. And that's such a huge problem where that's happening all around the world. And instead of people thinking liberal democracy is the thing that protects us, loads of people are like, yeah, fuck it, what's democracy ever done for me recently? And it comes from a place of people who have never lived in countries that aren't democracies and know how much we've struggled over those.
It's an incredibly
issues,
privileged, right? It's an incredibly like privileged mindset to take. A lot of like, because you see, like respectfully, but also incredibly disrespectfully to these people. A lot of them are like 17-year-old queer Western doomers with rich parents who think like, well, American hegemon hasn't gone away in the 18 years that I've been alive. So what is this all for anyway? Let it all burn and let the real civilization that I want rise from the ashes. Which every radical thinks, by the way. Every radical thinks, oh yeah, after everything collapses, totally my ideology will rise. But again, to bring it back to the basics, like basically every revolutionary and theorist of socialism from the 18th century and onwards was consistent in their belief that liberal democracy was the most effective bedrock upon which to build socialism, right? The idea that like industrialization takes your society through like liberal capitalism and then to socialism, that was like the initial template. Lenin worked with liberals in Russia to fight against fascists, the Black Knives Army or whatever it's called, I always forget. Mao stopped fighting against the government in order to fight against Japanese colonizers before resuming the revolutionary efforts after World War II. The whole, like, throughout history, we see this consistent pattern, which is it's good to fight for the future, but sometimes you have to, like, set your stuff down and realize there will be no future unless a specific group loses. And a lot of people have forgotten that. They don't seem to understand, like, the thing that Russia represents. Russia, like, you talk about Nazi countries. Russia is literally like like murder journalist, totalitarian regime. The most effective.
It's financing all of the far right in Europe.
And they finance the global right, and their most effective like military corps is the Wagner Group, a literal Nazi militia that like conscripts from penal camps and then goes down into Africa to murder black people for their gold mines. And like it's so black and white.
And then you've got people who call themselves leftist arguing that's not imperialism.
What I really want, by the way, like to be clear, what I really want is for the left to be able to focus on real conversations with regards to anti-imperialism. Because I've had conversations before and like, okay, well, what do you think you can do to better the world? Or like, what path should the world take or whatever? And I'm fully in favor of like massive decolonization, like industry seizure, nationalization, like third world hegemonic bloc, trade partnerships uniting to push back against American trade war. Like, I'm in favor of what I would consider to be some fairly like illiberal and radical foreign policy, But right now, all leftist foreign policy is just how do we throat Kremlin cock, like, most effectively? Like, how far down can we get it? And that literally, like, all lefty foreign policy conversations right now are like critical support for this fascist dictator because in one speech he compared America to Jews, open parentheses, they're both bad. You know, like, it's insane. There's nothing here. I want better conversations, and I expect better from the left broadly. You know, interestingly, Slavoj Žižek has actually written pretty effectively on the war in Ukraine and Russian propaganda on the matter. So as many L's as he's taken on other issues, he's actually like a surprisingly good voice on that particular subject.
Well, he's Eastern European, and now suddenly he's seen the humanity of Ukrainians where he didn't see the humanity of Syrians. Called it a pseudo struggle, a pseudo conflict.
Listen, we
we
stand a king who's seen some growth. Okay, it's the online, it's the left. My bar's like through the floor right now for expectations.